The first thing Jonathan Hale noticed when he stepped through the marble archway of his mansion that afternoon was laughter, real laughter, the kind that bubbled up from the chest and echoed without fear. It stopped him cold. Laughter was rare in this house, not because it was unhappy, but because it was controlled, scheduled, and quiet. Tutors spoke softly, nannies enforced rules gently, and Jonathan himself, a self-made millionaire who measured time in stock ticks and profit margins, usually communicated in efficient sentences and nods. Yet now, from the sunlit family room, came the thundering rhythm of children's joy. Jonathan loosened his tie as he followed the sound, curiosity tugging at him harder than any business call ever had. As he reached the doorway, he saw a sight that made his breath catch, not with anger at first, but with disbelief. His twin sons, Ethan and Lucas, were riding on the back of Maria, the maid he had hired barely 6 months earlier, their small hands gripping her shoulders as she crawled across the plush rug, neighing dramatically like a horse. The boys squealed with delight, urging her forward, their faces red with laughter, the room alive in a way Jonathan realized he hadn't felt since his wife passed away 3 years earlier. His initial reaction, sharp and reflexive, rose like a wall inside him. This was inappropriate, unprofessional, undignified. Employees had boundaries. Children had rules. Houses like his ran on order. His jaw tightened, and for a brief second he imagined firing her on the spot. But then Maria laughed too, not nervously, not forced, but freely, and Jonathan saw something else, his son's eyes shining with a happiness that no expensive toy, no elite school, no carefully curated activity had ever given them. In that moment, the memory hit him like a wave. His wife, Claire, on the living room floor years ago, giving the boys piggyback rides, laughing until she cried, telling Jonathan that joy didn't need permission. He had dismissed it then as sentiment. Now it stood in front of him, breathing and alive. Maria noticed him first. She froze, eyes wide, fear rushing into her expression as the boys slid off her back, confused. The room went silent. Jonathan felt every inch of his authority pressing on his chest, urging him to speak sharply, to restore control. Instead, his voice came out low and measured. "What's going on here?" The boys rushed to him at once, talking over each other, explaining the game, how Maria had made up voices, how she had turned a boring afternoon into an adventure. Maria stood slowly, smoothing her uniform, apologizing in a trembling voice, saying she hadn't meant any disrespect, that she only wanted to make the boys smile. Jonathan looked at her carefully then, not as staff, but as a person. He noticed the worn edges of her shoes, the tired kindness in her eyes, the way she looked at his sons with genuine care. He dismissed the boys gently to wash up for dinner and asked Maria to stay. Her hands clasped tightly in front of her, she braced herself for judgment. Jonathan walked to the window, staring out at the manicured gardens he rarely enjoyed. For years he had provided everything money could buy, believing that was enough. Yet here was proof that something vital had been missing. When he turned back to her, his voice surprised them both. "You didn't break any rules," he said slowly. "But you did something unexpected." Maria nodded, unsure. Jonathan continued, choosing his words as carefully as any contract. "My sons haven't laughed like that in a long time." Her eyes softened, and she told him about growing up with nothing but imagination, about how her own mother used play to survive hard days. Jonathan listened, truly listened, perhaps for the first time in years. That night, as he tucked his sons into bed, they hugged him tighter than usual, asking if Maria could play with them again tomorrow. Jonathan promised to think about it, but in his heart, something had already shifted. If this moment moved you even a little, remember stories like this deserve to be shared. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss another life-changing story. The next morning, Jonathan woke earlier than usual, his mind replaying the scene from the day before with surprising clarity. At breakfast, he watched his sons chatter excitedly about school, about games, about Maria's funny hoarse voice, and he realized how rarely he had truly observed them without distraction. Something inside him, a part long buried under ambition and grief, stirred awake. After dropping the boys off, Jonathan did something unheard of. He canceled his first meeting and returned home. He found Maria in the kitchen, startled by his presence. Instead of reprimanding her, he asked her to sit. He told her about Claire, about how laughter once filled the house, and how silence had taken over after loss. Maria listened respectfully, then shared her own story, how she had left her village to support her family, how kindness was the only wealth she truly owned. Jonathan felt the walls he'd built begin to crack. That afternoon, he invited Maria to stay during the boys' playtime, not as a servant, but as herself. What followed changed the rhythm of the house entirely. The boys laughed more. Jonathan stayed home more. Slowly, he joined in, awkward at first, then freer, discovering that connection was not a weakness but a strength. Weeks passed, and the transformation became impossible to ignore. Teachers noticed the boys' confidence blooming. The staff felt lighter. Jonathan himself slept better. Then came the decision that stunned everyone. At a family dinner, Jonathan announced that Maria would no longer be just the maid. He had enrolled her in early childhood education classes, fully funded, recognizing her natural gift. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to thank him. "You already paid me," Jonathan said quietly. "You gave my family something priceless." The mansion became a home again, not because of money, but because of humanity. Years later, when Jonathan spoke at a charity event, he told this story, not about wealth, but about humility, about how the smallest acts of kindness can redirect an entire life. And as the audience rose in applause, he knew the real success was not measured in millions, but in moments. If this story inspired you, touched your heart, or reminded you what truly matters, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because the next story might change everything for you too.